Hello and welcome. It's raining again, but hopefully we've overcome some of the issues with the sound, albeit unfortunately with the live streaming at 6 a.m. and it is supposed to be at 6 p.m. India Standard Time, we are still having difficulties. I say we, I am at this end having difficulties getting it out to you, and your end having perhaps difficulties hearing it clearly. This is not as a result of the equipment at this end, which, thanks to your generosity and support, has been upgraded to allow for the differences in the way YouTube allows us to upload things these days, and improvements in that sense. But what remains not so sure, not so certain, and very much anicca is the internet service at this time with this rain. I think that's predominantly the problem. There are many localized power cuts. Whether or not that takes out various transmitters, I'm not sure, but certainly the internet for the live streaming makes for a rather poor quality affair. The evening puja at 6 p.m. is a non-starter. I can't even get the live streaming to begin, because at that time here, I suppose the mobile internet is in very much high demand. That's probably the peak time. So the service is even more poor than it is at 6 a.m. in the morning, when it is probably at its best. But the rain will pass in due course, and the weather conditions will improve. And I would imagine with upgrades of systems, repairs, everything to do with the internet will also improve. So we just exercise Khanti, patience and endurance. These talks are not so difficult because I can record them and then upload them immediately afterwards. And then the internet service isn't so important. It may take a long time, or it may not take so long, but that's neither here nor there. So we'll strive on through these conditions, and moving on with that, coming to the first comment here, there's a preamble about this person's practice and background, but just getting on to the question, I wonder if you have had certain experiences that have brought you answers, whether you are still a seeker or whether you simply choose to remain a monk after awakening. So try to break this down. I wonder if you have had certain experiences that have brought you answers. So life's experiences, of which we all have many, do teach us, are our teachers. We learn from our mistakes, we learn from our successes. We're continuously learning if we choose to. Or we can simply bumble on through life without seeing the truth, the reality in existence, maybe even putting it down to bad luck or coincidence or a higher power, a God or a belief system that is dictating that that is the way it's meant to be, and maybe even worshipping and praying to that belief for it to be better in the future. Or we can choose to look at the situation as it is, as suffering, and we can then try and identify what the cause of that suffering is. And once having identified the cause of that suffering, we can go about trying to bring about an end to that suffering. And this is to be done, as the Buddha teaches us in the Dharma, through practicing of the Noble Eightfold Path, living within the parameters, in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path, within its parameters of sila, moral virtue, meditation, samadhi, practicing meditation, and mindfulness in all of our activities of body, speech and mind, and developing wisdom to see clearly what is going on around us and the nature of existence. For example, anicca, the uncertainty of everything and impermanence of everything. So it may have a downpour of rain during this talk. This cannot be predicted. Whenever I record this talk, that may happen. We are unsure. I was expecting that the rain had now finished, but now it's resumed and continues. Life is uncertain, and we can choose to pick up from this experience the reality of that, see it clearly, and use it to our advantage, knowing that it is out of our control, as are our physical bodies, and our thinking brains with all of its desires, its wants, wanting things to be other than they are, or wanting to have more of what we haven't got enough of or think is the case, rather than just trying to satisfy what it is we really need. Now, the question, I wonder if you have had certain experiences that brought you answers. We've all had these experiences. The answers are there for us to see. But what do? Mostly, we cover up the suffering, or we distract ourselves from the suffering by entertaining ourselves, scrolling through YouTube, watching television, movies, or indulging ourselves in eating and drinking, maybe taking intoxicants, any forms of sensual desire, stimulation that distracts us from the reality of existence. So to go on a meditation retreat and live in very simple, basic accommodation for a period of time, with very little by way of conversation with others during that time, some duties of a very mundane and basic nature, cleaning, preparing of food, but primarily just sitting and doing nothing and observing the physical body, its physical feelings, the thinking brain and the mental emotions, and watching this process of suffering as it builds up, becomes difficult, even intolerable, and then eventually passes away. Observing this, that whole idea of a retreat doesn't sound very appealing, does it, when put that way? But that's what it is. But come on this enlightenment tour, this invitation to a Vipassana retreat in the forest with monks, living with nature. Experience the truth, experience awakening, experience enlightenment. Now that sounds wonderful and appealing, doesn't it? But it's the same thing. It's distracting from the truth of what you're going to do, which is bare yourself to the reality of truth. Because once we see this clearly, that is enlightenment. So you go on to say about these experiences, which we have all had, whether you are still a seeker or whether you simply choose to remain a monk after awakening. So what is a seeker? Am I still a seeker? To me, the seekers were an old 1960s, 70s male group singing chorus band or something of that nature that my grandmother used to listen to. The seekers followed by the new seekers. Were they spiritual? No, I think maybe some of them went on to be at some point in their future. But primarily during the peak of their career, they were producing lovely music to distract us. But I'm being facetious. A seeker, someone looking for something. We have nothing to look for. The Buddha taught us that. He said you could go to the ends of the universe and beyond. You can travel around and round this planet of ours forever and ever and never find the answer. The answers are all here in this fathom-length body. That is, this bag of skin from the top of our head to the tip of our toes, containing lots of horrible things, and in essence, quite an unattractive, an unwholesome, unappealing sack of gunk, with bones, organs, fluids, gases, contained within and seeping out, continually needing cleaning. All of the answers are here within this. It is in fact a wonderful library of information. It is in fact a living organism of learning and teachings. We can observe it in its moment-to-moment existence and experience, with all of its sensory contact, feelings, all of its mental formations, and all of our reactions or unreactive nature towards those feelings. This is the experience. This is where we can learn everything. We don't need to go out seeking, looking, searching, and we never had to go out. It's all here. But again, we've covered it over. So it isn't certain experiences. There are always experiences there. There always have been, for all of us, not just me. But we distract ourselves from those experiences, we cover them up. We're not seeking because we already have all of the information, the facts, the truth here. Nothing to be learned, nothing to be believed, just to be known through the experience we have of this physical body, the feelings that arise from it and sense contact with the external environment, our thinking brain and mental formations that occur within that, and our sense consciousness of all of this that's going on. When we open our eyes to this, and our ears, when we're aware of our sensual experience and contact with the external environment, as well as its effect on this physical body and our presence here in the present moment, we are becoming awakened. We are all able to just uncover what is there, push away those distractions, and sit and observe. And one way of doing this is going on to the said meditation retreat, as I described. But however it's described in all its Instagram colourful glory, with its mystical nature and magical powers, or just as a very austere concrete room to sleep on an uncomfortable mat on the floor and to sit for hours on end, eating just one not very good meal a day, but just bearing with it all for 10 days, 14 days, 3 months, 3 years, or the rest of your life. Now that could be how we would describe monastic life. You say, do I choose to remain a monk? Well, I am already a monk. I have no aspirations to do anything else. So it isn't a conscious choice to remain a monk because I am still seeking or I'm not still seeking. As I said, there's nothing to look for. We all have the information to hand. The experiences we all have anyway. But we cover up, we distract. Renunciation, ordination, monastic life is renouncing all of that. Renouncing those distractions and the ability to distract ourselves. Uncovering everything. Stripping ourselves of our identity. Shaving our heads. Disposing of our clothes or giving them away. And all of our worldly goods. In exchange for these simple robes. And, well, 7 other basic requisites. The 3 robes, our bowl to collect our food in, our 1 meal a day, needle and cotton, a cup or a water filter, a belt, and a razor. We don't need anything else. And with just that simplicity of life, we're exposed to that truth, less able to cover things up or distract ourselves, and therefore more quickly able to see clearly that nature of existence. So it isn't this magical spiritual path that one goes out as a seeker, takes some given knowledge from a teacher, a spiritual master, is enlightened, and then goes back to ordinary life, a better person. No. And neither is a retreat such a thing, but a place where you go, or you practice this, you do this at home, you renounce for certain times when you're able to, those extra things by taking those extra 3 precepts on top of your 5, and you lead a more simple way of living. To see clearly what's going on. And when you see clearly, when you awaken to this, the suffering becomes less so. We're not suffering because of the rain. We know it's going to rain, or it's not going to rain. But we know this is the uncertainty. We know that if we choose to allow it to be our cause of suffering, because we want it to be otherwise than the way it is, then that is our choice. That's what we choose. But we can choose to accept as things are, not so much passively, but with understanding. It doesn't mean we have to just roll over and accept all that's bad in the world. No, we can help. We can do what we possibly can do to strive to assist others. To develop, when we're not practicing meditation, when we're going about our ordinary day-to-day activities, develop what we possibly can by way of generosity, through either giving what we have to give, or surplus, or our time to others to help them, support them, or lend a listening ear, so to speak, to people in need of someone to talk to. There are all kinds of ways we can develop qualities that take us away from the suffering of life and what can build up into what we know as depression and anxiety. And one sure remedy to depression and anxiety is going out and helping people, going out and giving. And we all have different opportunities to do that. Now, I thought as a monk, or as an renunciant, having given up everything, I'd have very little to offer. But considered that by renouncing worldly life and taking less from the world and concentrating on my practice, what I was giving was the example of just that, this opportunity that we have to become part of a Sangha, to renounce worldly life and ordain, and focus solely on the practice and wholeheartedly on living in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path within its parameters of Sila, Samadhi, Panya. And therefore taking the direct route, undistracted, without covering up things, towards enlightenment or nirvana. And by that example, showing others that there is also that way. But the Buddha teaches us the middle path, the middle way, and that is applicable to both monastics who have renounced worldly life and lay practitioners living in worldly life, in family life, with jobs, with social activities, with friends and acquaintances. And I spoke about that recently in a talk, so I won't go into it again in detail here. But that's the essential balance of the Buddhasasana, this Buddhist religion, and how and why it's lasted for so long unchanged. So I will remain a monk because I choose not to distract myself with other things, choose not to cover up the suffering, but having exposed myself to it, seen it for what it really is, and seen it as being not so bad. And in fact, just reviewing the things that as a monk or as monks we can do by way of generosity, this talking to you here, sharing my experience, to me is very straightforward. A few times a week, sitting down and talking to you like this. I don't really have to go out of my way. But it seems that it's very much appreciated because of all the encouraging comments I get and the emails and the thanks, the expressions of gratitude for me providing you with this stuff to listen to, put it that way. So immediately I feel content that I'm doing something as a result of my own experience to help others. And then each day going on Pindapata, seemingly just to get my food, to receive food for me, to sustain my existence for another day. If, on the very few occasions, one or two really, that I haven't done that, there's so much response as a result of me not doing that. People come here to where I'm staying, to my kuti, they seek me out, find me, to check that I'm okay, and ask me when I'll be coming back again. I say, well, no, sorry, it was just something happened and I'll be back tomorrow. And I can see how much they appreciate the opportunity to see a monk. So it's not me, they're seeing the Sangha, a representative of the Sangha. They see the robes, the Pindapata bowl, the walking barefoot through the village into the town, collecting alms, yes, for my sustenance, for the support of the Sangha, and for the support of my own practice, but to give those people offering, and everyone who sees that, also blessings and a reminder and encouragement in their own practice on the path towards awakening or enlightenment. So already just there are two ways in which unexpectedly, but naturally, I have found myself being able to offer dana back to those that are so generously supporting me. And then expanding from that, going on my return journey from Pindapata, which I now have to come back in a tuk-tuk because I can't literally physically carry all of the offerings by the end of my route. And you could say, well, just shorten your route. Well, yes, I could just walk to the end of the road and back again, and I would have enough to eat. But then all of the local people wouldn't get to see the samana, the sign of a practitioner going on alms, an alms mendicant, which does inspire people. It is one of the 4 heavenly messengers that inspired the Buddha to go out and seek himself to become enlightened and to become our Buddha. So he encouraged all bhikkhus and bhikkhunis to every day consider it our duty to go on Pindapata in this form. So I go on the full journey, and then a tuk-tuk brings me back, but we're able to stop on the way at the local government hospital and distribute all of that surplus food to the patients who are staying there. So we go to the men's ward, the ladies' ward, the children's ward. I say I, but the nurses or doctors follow behind, accompany me, and just to assist and explain to the people, I'm not there at this now point wanting them to give me something, but what I want to do is give them something. Give them a nice snack, a packet of biscuits or a carton of milk or some wrapped up hoppers, they call it, noodly food things, street food. Buns, biscuits, breads, all of these things. So I'm able to just give that to the patients. Otherwise they might not have a snack in the morning, they might not have breakfast. They're usually waiting for their family to come in at around lunchtime to bring them one meal, just something to get them through the day. Because hospitals don't usually have catering facilities here. And that's just come about naturally, without any thought, but is another way that I am able to give, to pass on or pay forward, as they say in some circles, that generosity that I have received. So it's with that sense that I say Anumodana sadhu, sadhu, sadhu to all of you for supporting me here, as you do so very generously with your financial contributions or donations online that go to the non-profit organisation that helps support me staying here in this country to be able to do that. These activities of generosity, paying your kindness forward to others, because I don't need anything much at all. I could just get my bowl, enough food in the morning to live on, sit in my kuti, eat my meal and practice with no other interaction. But that isn't how the Buddha taught us to live. This is not the way it is prescribed in the Vinaya. We are to teach the Dharma when it's appropriate to do so. We are to go on Pindapata each and every day, and we consider these things our duty. And with the surplus that is given, offered to the Sangha, it is wonderful to have that opportunity for me as a monk, and unexpectedly to be able to also exercise generosity, the generosity of giving. And this is not to mention the generosity we are all able to partake in in giving the greatest gift that there is to give, and that is the gift of fearlessness, by keeping sila, by refraining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and the taking of intoxicants, just those 5 precepts, all beings feel safe around you. When this becomes ingrained in your being, it's not something you think about. The precepts aren't something you take once a month or once a week or once a day, but they're ingrained in your very sense of being. You cannot harm another being. You simply find it impossible. You cannot take something that isn't freely offered to you, given to you, isn't yours. You wouldn't consider unfaithfulness or sexual misconduct of any kind. You cannot lie. And you see no reason ever to take intoxicants and dull the mind, dull that sense of mindfulness. This is the way we consider precepts. They're not rules. They're just reminders of those things we just simply cannot do anymore. We're awake to the suffering that causes ourselves and others. So I don't choose to be a monk. I could not be anything else. There's no other option. Everything else is unnecessary. And then it goes on from hospital dana, the giving and the immense joy that comes from that. Even the tuk-tuk driver that comes with me, the various tuk-tuk drivers that come each day, I use different ones all of the time now. I find that's much more productive way of doing it. And we pay, you pay. We have an app, an online app that books the tuk-tuk or gets the tuk-tuk for me. And it's a very small amount of money, but it covers their fuel. And it means that I don't feel that I have to rush. For instance, when stopping at a hospital to give out offer hospital dana, although the tuk-tuk driver is so happy to be able to join me with that, you see how much pleasure they get from that as well, that aspect of giving and generosity. And I feel it only fair that we cover the cost of their fuel and their time, and that they're not able, during what is now coming up to the tourist season, to be picking up tourists during that time and earning their living to support their families. So because of your support and because of that app, they're able to be paid without me using money, having to handle money, without me even having to explain where I'm going and what I'm doing each day to each driver. It can be pre-programmed on the app for them to pick me up at the end point of the Pindapata, take me to the hospital. They usually come in, they don't want to join me on that because they find it such a fulfilling experience, and then bring me back to my kuti. And then they get paid automatically. So that's again a wonderful thing. Supporting local businesses, small businesses, yes, but that is the nature of businesses here. Tuk-tuk drivers earning a living to support their families, people selling things by the road. And we try to keep everything within the locality here, supporting the community. And in very many ways, we are also doing that. Supporting local businesses with the other requisites that I perhaps need from time to time that are not offered. Cat food, for instance. I know that's not particularly a requisite, but I do like to keep the cats well nourished, otherwise, because they're basically feral. It also means that they are doing less harm to other creatures in nature. We don't rock the balance of nature too much. If I go away, you know, the cats still know how to feed themselves and their families. They'll catch their food. But if it can be avoided by feeding them, this is another thing that we're able to help with locally. And of course, we refurbished this old building to create this meditation hall, Samadhi Sala. it goes on, actually. And they have in Sri Lanka a tradition of a kindness book. So all the generosity or the punya karma, the dana they're giving in the morning, or good deeds they do, they make a note of in a little book. And I think the idea of that is towards the end of their life, or even on their deathbed, they pick up the book and they remind themselves of all the good they've done. And what better way to go? Thinking about all the good you've done, rather than regretting all the bad things you've done. So I was thinking about this book, and that's perhaps what brought up this little list I've just started going through there, just looking at not the good, just the good I'm doing, the good we're doing here. Because anything I can do here is as a result of the support you give me. It's always paid forward. It's always re-given, donated on. Because I need so very little. But I really get so much fulfillment from being able to help others and support people locally. And hopefully support you in your practice by what I have to offer here in these talks. So I've digressed a little bit there, but I've tried to take the questioner's way of thinking about, as I said, they go on about they talk about their current lifestyle. I didn't go into it in too much detail because that's personal, but you say you live an undisciplined Taoist sort of lifestyle after a sudden awakening. But you're unable to commit yourself so deeply personally to the practice that you see that I have committed myself to by being an ordained bhikkhu. But however, that isn't quite the right way to see it, because if you are practicing, whether it be Taoist or other religions or philosophies, if you are practicing kindness, generosity, firstly, within a moral perimeter of virtue, keeping precepts, doing no harm primarily to yourself or others, and you're practicing some form of mental development, developing wholesome mind states and reducing unwholesome mind states. Now it might be through chanting japas or praying to something, singing hymns, whatever it is, it's still developing wholesome mind states, reducing unwholesome mind states. Now that might not be the direct path the Buddha is teaching us towards awakening, towards enlightenment, but it is in itself a step along the way and may lead to other things. So don't belittle your own practice and don't compare it to that of life within the Sangha, life of a renunciant. The life of the upasaka, upasika, the laymen, the laywomen, Buddhist practitioners, is just as important as those of the practice and lives of the ordained Sangha. Because as I did explain recently and often repeat, it is that is the stability of the Buddha Sasana, the Buddhist religion, as we call it, for want of a better word. But the Sangha, bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, and the lay practitioners, upasakas and upasikas, are the fourfold assembly, or the four legs of the table, which keep it solid and firm. So you're as much of an important part of it, if it isn't it, but this practice of goodness, as anyone else, and are able to attain to awakening, enlightenment, at some point in the future, when perhaps your duties and responsibilities are reduced, your life becomes less hectic and busy. You have more opportunities for quietude. Or you can go on retreats of whatever nature, but times away from your ordinary daily activities, separating yourself from that, where you can just focus on the practice for a period of time, working more directly towards enlightenment, but returning to family life, lay life afterwards. That is different to renunciation and ordination, where one has already learned those lessons, seen what there is to be seen, begun to refrain from distracting oneself, began to uncover the truth, and found the path in ordination, through renunciation, in monastic life. If seen clearly, that path, that is the way forward, that cannot be unseen, really. Those that disrobe perhaps haven't seen that as clearly as they might have. Otherwise they would remain in robes. Given the opportunity, without family commitments, without financial responsibilities, debts for instance, being able to ordain, there is no other choice. One sees that. So I hope that's expanded a little bit on what you were trying to ask, but also answered the questions you had. Now, this one, right? Oh, this is a highlighted one. I wonder if you have had well, that's the same question. Ah, yes, it's just where I've highlighted it. Sorry. May I ask what happened to your finger? Oh, on a lighter note, well, I cut it off, basically. So I was in the forest cutting some string, twine, around some hazel fencing barriers, and with a machete like this, you cut the little stick things down the posts, and there was some string tied around it. I was cutting that. It was raining, and it slipped, and I cut through my finger. Didn't cut it completely off, but damaged it so much that it had to be surgically removed, which I had done with just a local anesthetic. I watched them cut it off, which was an interesting experience, because it was just literally like cutting through a chicken. If you ever eat chicken, or have eaten chicken on your plate, and you cut through the joints there in the chicken drumsticks, it was just like that, cutting through the joint of my finger with a very sharp scalpel, and putting it in a little tray, covering it up and taking it away. I did ask if I could keep it, but you're not allowed to keep your own body parts today in hospitals. So even our physical bodies there is an example of anatta. If you have anything cut off, your arm or your leg, my father had to have his, before he died, had to have his whole right arm amputated. Now imagine if you could keep that, bring that home, and preserve it in a big vat or something, and then mount it, as people used to with animals, you know, taxidermy, those stuffed animals. You can't do that, you see, in a hospital. It's not yours. It has to be taken away and taken to the incinerator with all of the other body parts. So I think you used to be able to bring your gallstones home if they were removed, or other bits and bobs in a jar, but no longer. So, like going to the hairdressers when you have your hair cut off, do you ask them to bag it up and take it with you? No. No, it's gone, it's rubbish. So even something as much as a whole arm or a finger, we think of it as us, don't we? Ours, what we are, our physical body. But there's an example of how it really so isn't. You watch them cut the finger off, take it away, and you're not allowed to keep it. But it's mine, I've had it all my life. I've probably said that, I think I said that. They said, well, no, sorry, it's the rules, hospital rules. That's all they say, hospital rules, no, not allowed. So that's the way it is. This body, this physical body, and even this thinking brain is not ours. The thinking brain still thinks the finger's there. And my father told me that his thinking brain, not in so many words, but he found it very uncomfortable because his arm was still there. As far as his thinking brain was concerned, as illogical as it might seem, this finger's not there, my father's arm was not there. To the brain, it's still there. They're still there. Because the brain has got used to them being there. This with my finger becomes evident when I cut my fingernails. It always feels really weird because it feels like I can never cut that fingernail and it's just growing and growing and growing. Imagine if you never cut one of your fingernails, it would feel odd. It just feels like that. I don't know why, because it's been many years since that finger's not been there. But it still feels itchy and like there's a fingernail that needs to be cut there. This is just delusion. This is how strong that delusion is. Even with those of us that are practicing all of the time, the finger's still there even though it's not there. So that's how close our attachment is to this physical body. That is the fetter we're having to cut through, the tie we're having to cut through, like that piece of string I was trying to cut through when I cut off my finger. It was a bit of a tough old job. I was cutting and slipped and cut my finger. This is Mama Puddy Cat. She's just had, about 4 weeks ago, kittens. The other two cats, Squeaky Pops and Spotty Dotty, were her kittens. Now she has more kittens. This is her son. This is family life in the cat world. But see, she's just playing with her son here. I met the kitten for the first time because they don't live with me. They're neighbouring places they come from. But I asked after the kittens, and the owner brought one. It was about this big, even after 4 weeks. Very small, very cute. Looked like a baby version of Spotty Dotty. It's sibling now, it's brother or sister, brother. Anyway, I digress. These are my Kalyanamita. We do have great long conversations, I have to admit to that. I think they understand me because they do listen intently. I hope some of it's going in. Anyway. Oh, another sort of by the way question. Excuse me, but I'm no longer getting the French translations on your YouTube channel. Is this normal? Yeah, so I don't know. So how all of this works is a mystery to me, and I just do the very bare minimum. Sit here, talk, hope I've remembered to push the button to record what I'm talking about, hope that I've remembered or the microphone has come on and I've put it somewhere where you can hear me, and then turn it off at the end, push another button and hope it all goes up to YouTube. Then it's their province. It's what they do the rest. So if you have any technical issues like that, you can just Google that exact question. These days, when you search in Google, I'm learning myself that you can just write any old stuff in there. You don't have to think very cleverly about how you word the question. You could write your question just like that in Google now, I think, and it will give you the answer. And what it is probably just taking a little bit more time than normal. The processing sometimes for certain videos takes a lot longer than others. And I did look at this. I had another problem that I had to Google, And you know how it is, it comes up with lots of answers to other questions other than the one you really want answered sometimes. And it has become apparent that the more popular the videos are, the better treatment they get in the house of Google. the better room in that hotel they get. They're more accessible, they get put out more, and they get all that itemization. All the questions get individualized and chapterized. And of course the automated translations. Now I don't know whether you mean the captions or the voice ones. I've never even seen or heard these, but there are such things apparently. It's all automatic, it's all automated. But the more popular the videos are, so the more of you that subscribe, the more of you that watch these videos, well, the better they get treated by YouTube, it seems. So if it's not in French at the moment, go back to it in a few days' time. The French might be there. Otherwise, bonjour to you, and comment ça va? I'll speak in French for you, there we are. Maybe it'll translate that into English. Later, à tout à l'heure. So yes, please just Google YouTube problems, where is the captions, where is the subtitles, and it will come up later. It's not very black and white. It's not, these days, this technology doesn't seem to be so, one would think that you upload one video in exactly the same way as you upload another video, and they would be treated exactly the same way. Not the case at all, it seems. One might have itemized questions immediately with audio dubbing of another language. Another might not receive that for some days. And there's no real logic that I can see. But I don't spend a lot of time looking into this. There are people that know all these answers and work with all of these issues and these things to their advantage. So I will leave that for your own research. But it's not me, it's YouTube. Okay, will you be making any full Dharma recordings soon without questions and answers? I would appreciate one on the 5 remembrances in detail. Okay, I think the 5 remembrances are the 5 reflections of, what are they? I'm of the nature to age, I'm of the nature to get sick, I'm of the nature to die. All that I love I will be separated from, and all that I am responsible for my karma and the beneficiary of my karma. So, aging, sickness, death, we will be separated from all the things that we love, as those will be separated from us, and karma. These are the 5 reflections. I think that's what you're referring to. I mean, I don't normally give Dharma talks having been given a title. The Dharma talks you're referring to, and usually each week there is one amidst these questions and answers talks, albeit the past 2 weeks there have been a lot of questions and answers to catch up on. So I haven't digressed into just talking, because that's what happens. I sit down and I either intend to go for the comments and questions, but a subject comes up and I just start talking. Or there are comments and questions, and one question might lead to a lengthy talk. Or one question just might lead to the next question, and I'll answer lots of questions. I don't plan this. It's not the nature of this channel. And I don't give talks having been given a title, because it's just not the nature of the way I've done things here, or have been doing things here. But if it seems that I'm not giving Dharma talks, they are there, they are categorized. Just go to the playlist headed Dharma talks, and you'll see that probably the most recent one was now maybe 2 weeks ago. But there'll be another coming up soon. However, each and every one of these, whether they're in the category of questions and answers or Dharma talks, are, by way of the nature of these talks, a discussion on Dharma. Us talking about Dharma. prompted by some of your comments and questions. And the reason I do it that way is because they keep the talks relevant to you and your practice, rather than what I think you should be hearing. So often Dharma talks are on a title and a lecture on what someone thinks you should be listening to and hearing. Whereas these, I hope, are responding to what you're asking, and therefore what you're needing to hear, rather than what I think you should be hearing. But with a leaning towards the Dharma and that alone, and that of Sila, Samadhi, Panya, Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta. That overall holistic practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. Each and every one of these questions and answers or Dharma talks are of that nature. But I'm sure that the questions on these reflections will come up time and time again, as they are always. These reflections are chanted in the chanting of the 5 subjects for frequent recollection every night in Thai monasteries by the laity and the monastics alike. In fact, the monastics not so, they chant the 10 subjects for frequent recollections, as do those people living in the monastery, whom also reflect upon the nature of their requisites and what is offered to them by way of their food, their pindapata dana, their cloth requisites, their chivra dana, their robes, and medicine requisites, Gilyana Pachaya dana, the medicinal needs that are met by the offerings of the laity. These are included in the 10 subjects for frequent recollection for monastics and those living in monasteries. So there, I've spoken about that subject again. It doesn't warrant, I don't think, it could be expanded upon and spoken about at length, and I'm sure I could do so. But I'd rather use that as something, as a subject, something we come back to time and time again. That is the nature of reflections or remembrances, something you come back to time and time again, every day. But you don't want to hear someone talking about that for 40 minutes to an hour, even once. It's not necessary. We get old, we get sick, we die. Now, the story which I've recounted many times of the Buddha going out from the palace, meeting the old man, meeting the sick man, seeing the dead body, and then finally the 4th heavenly messenger, as I mentioned earlier, the Samana. That is the talk on which these 5 reflections are based. That is the sutta, the Dharma talk that's commonly given. And I speak about that usually every Wesak, every full moon in May, when we talk about the life of the Buddha, his enlightenment after his birth, and then finally his parinibbana, his death, when on that day those 3 occasions, those 3 events are celebrated. So go through, I mean, there's even talks on this channel already, headed 5 subjects for frequent reflections, I think. Or maybe searching on Google is a difficult thing, I know. And it doesn't matter what titles we put in. I know my titles might not necessarily pertain to the content. There is reasons behind that. If the title is just what the talk is about, then only a few people will be interested and get to hear what is to be said within that talk. Whereas because within all of these talks we talk about a whole range of subjects, I think it's important that as many people listen to the talk as possible who might benefit from hearing what is being said, what we are discussing amongst ourselves here by way of Dharma. And hopefully many people will benefit. If a talk is just called so-and-so, so contemplating death, people will only watch that talk if they're interested in the subject of contemplating death. But invariably that talk will cover many, many other aspects of Dharma also, that relates to everybody. The Dharma is all-encompassing, being that it is nature. It is the nature of existence. So I try to keep the titles vague for that reason, so that people get to hear Dharma that relates to them and is personal to them. And how many times is it that we have all put on a Dharma talk without even thinking about its subject, and somehow throughout that Dharma talk suddenly something comes up, one comment comes up, and you say, wow, that is just what the problem I had. That is just the answer that I needed to hear at this moment. That completely just relates to me and my situation now. That's happened to me so many times when listening to Dharma talks in the past. And I'm sure it's happened to you. And the reason that is because it's always applicable, the Dharma, to all of us. So there's always going to be something in there that is hopefully useful, or you find it hopefully useful, that you can pick up and use. But if not, just put it down and leave it until next time. Something else might come up. So just keep listening to all of the talks. But yeah, the just Dharma talks where I'm not looking or reading any questions and sitting here and talking, they come up, but they come up naturally. Not when I decide to do so, even. I'll sit down, usually with the questions in front of me, and just start talking and not get round to the questions. And then I think, oh, now I've got a lot more questions to answer next time. But that's good. There can never be enough. This is what keeps this channel, your channel, keeps it going, along with your generosity and support. That's what funds it, keeps the data going. That's the way I understand it anyway. I don't have to worry too much about it because it has data. But if there wasn't data, then we couldn't upload the talks. So thanks to your kindness there is, and it continues. And the questions, the comments, give us content to talk about. But there will be, yes, definitely, occasions coming up very soon when I shall just sit and talk. Sit and waffle on, if you like, but sit and just talk. Perhaps when there are not so many comments and questions, or perhaps when there's something, a subject matter that's come up in my experience that I want to share with you. And that is in a continual, ongoing, progressing, growing, organic thing, if you can call it a thing. But it is the nature of this channel, which I like to think is organic. It's organic in the way it's grown. I've never pushed it through, it's never been pushed through any sort of other social media outlets or promoted. I don't even say, oh, please subscribe to this channel and like, or any of these comments that one is, some people are inclined to do, because it's not necessary. If there's 1 subscriber or 10 subscribers or 10,000 or 20,000, it's not neither here nor there, as long as someone is hearing the Dharma. That's what is important. Otherwise, it's just the cats, my feline friends, and the other creatures. Incidentally, a side issue, I was sitting in my kuti yesterday afternoon. I tell a lie, I was actually laying down, I was just having a rest under the fan. It was quite hot before the rain started. I suppose it was the lull before the storm. And I was just laying under the fan, and I saw out of the corner of my eyes, because I was sort of practicing laying down meditation. I wasn't asleep. I had my eyes gently open. I saw out of the corner of my eyes something quite near my toes. Thinking it was a cat, I thought nothing of it. And then it moved in a way that cats don't move. So I sat up. It was this really long, not so fat, but really long snake that had coiled itself around the door, through the gap between the wall, the frame and the hinges, and around the door, like this, in the doorway, right by my toes, where I used to sit for some Dharma talks back in the older videos. And I thought, oh, here we go. And then one of the cats, which was up on the these high up ceiling, the walls don't touch the roof, so the cats like to walk around the top of the walls, was up there. It sort of made a noise, and the snake uncoiled itself and slithered off. But they are the creatures in nature that I share my experience with and teach me the Dharma. Now this snake, I don't know whether they're poisonous or not, or what damage they can do, but I don't fear them because they don't fear me. But when they see that I'm awake, they go away. It didn't rush off at any particular speed, it just slithered off in its own natural way across the veranda and over the wall, and then they seemed to miraculously just disappear into the plants and the undergrowth. So as soon as it knew that I was aware of its presence, or it was aware of the cat's presence, probably, it slithered off. But these are just aspects of nature that demonstrate to us the power of that sila, the power of doing no harm, and showing that to all beings. Because by that they wish to do you no harm. Creatures only wish to harm, or don't wish to harm you, are forced to harm you out of fear for their own lives, out of their own fear. So if they have no fear, if you give them that gift of fearlessness, they won't harm you, and they just slither off back to where they came from. So on that note, if there's something useful, please use it or just let it go. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.